Hey guys, Sean from Crafted Elements. Today's video is going to be a little bit different because although we're a mold company, I also do actually enjoy making things here in the shop. One of the machines that I use the most is our Axiom AR16 CNC, and this video is going to be about combining the power of a CNC machine with, what most of us are familiar with if you follow us here, with resin. So what we're going to be making today and what is currently being made is a couple of live edge home signs. And now this video is really about combining the CNC's ability with the cool features that resin has, coloring, tinting, pigmenting, filling in, to make really cool signs that are more than just a CNC engraved sign. So let's get started. Now this is by no means going to be a full how-to CNC video. There are plenty of videos on that. This is really a top-level primer. If you're a woodworker, a hobbyist woodworker, or a resin artist, a CNC machine may sound too advanced or kind of out of reach or whatever. But we have a big machine here. It's a borderline industrial machine. It's somewhere between a commercial machine and light industrial machine. You don't need anything that big for making really cool resin CNC projects. So there are different companies. Shapeco, Carbide 3D, Inventables, X-Carve. I think there's one called Open 3D or Open Carve or something like that, that are more consumer level CNC machines, that will range in the $1,000 to maybe $5,000 at most range. That's a $15,000 US machine plus shipping and all the accessories is, out of reach for most makers, honestly. There are certainly way more expensive machines, $50,000, $60,000, $100,000. But again, what I'm telling you this for is you can make really cool stuff, with a few $1,000 machine. And again, this video is not on those CNC machines. You can do your own research on that, but there are plenty of options out there. So if you're a resin artist looking to scale what you can do, improve your business, maybe get into signage and things like that, a CNC machine is definitely helpful to have. So what I have here is software called Vectric, which is a common software used for people who are CNCing. And my mom wanted me to make her a sign inspired by something she found on, I don't know if it was Instagram or the internet, but this home sign, welcome home. She didn't want the welcome part, or welcome to our home. She didn't want the welcome to our part. She just wanted a sign that said home, and then she wanted hummingbird engraved on top. So that's what this is. I've used a CNC machine in high school, but I'm a developer, graphic designer, things like that. I've done all that stuff. So this part really isn't that complicated to me. But I did have some apprehensions like, there's a whole new tool I have to learn. Honestly, doing basic stuff like engraving with a CNC machine is so easy. Like, it's just so easy. You lay your design out like you would on Word or Publisher or Adobe Photoshop, so to speak. It's a vector, which just means it's a 2D line drawing. You select it. You select which bit you are using in your router. So the router is attached. The router is actually attached to the CNC's gimbal, and you hit generate, and then you save it to your USB stick, or if you have a CNC machine that's controlled through the computer, you don't even need the USB stick, and you press go once you've set up your piece of wood on the CNC. Like, it really is not a complex process. So I was even a little bit apprehensive, to try and learn this, even though I had used one in high school, but like literally within a day I was making like pretty advanced signs. So don't get too hung up on the technology. But again, now that I've been blabbing for another 3 or 4 minutes here, let's get on to the part where we're actually going to make some things, and then get on to where you can use resin to backfill those to make a really cool sign. And now one of the cool things about CNC machine is what it can cut. Most CNC machines will cut obviously wood, foam, plastic. Some will even cut light grade aluminum. I never worked with aluminum on this machine. I probably never will. But if you're making signs, you can use a high-grade plywood, you can use MDF, or you can use live edge wood. So this giant mess that I have over here on the floor, I'm going to just tilt the camera down so you can see it, is the result of me debarking this live edge cedar. And essentially, you know, it's a laborious, tedious process, but it's not really that hard. Tools to debark a live edge piece of wood is this, I don't know, I call it a debarking knife. I think that's what it's for, but you can actually get these on Amazon. This one, I believe, is made by like Beavercraft. And basically you use this, pulling against the live edge to get the bark and the sapella wood off. Sapella wood being the sapwood, which is the wood, the softer wood that gets, that's right before. It's more of a lighter color than this, or rather a darker color in the case of cedar, lighter color in the case of something like walnut. So that would be your start. The next thing is, for the hard to get places, a wood chisel and a hammer. And then if you have a really difficult piece that is not coming off, I use a grinder and shaping wheel. So a shaping wheel is an attachment to your grinder. It's a hard metal piece and it's got a bunch of divots, and literally it just eats. It just eats through wood. So that takes off that live edge super quick. And then after you've done that, 80 to 120 grit sandpaper to clean the edge up even more and make it a little bit soft, you end up with this relatively nice piece of live edge with most of the bark removed. So hopefully you can hear me over this machine. Right now it's a bit loud because of the way it's cutting with the router bit. But obviously this is an Axiom AR16. It's a 4x4 foot machine. Sorry, 4x4 cut area. I think it's 6x5 a physical size, and it's like 3,000 pounds or something. So this is a big machine. It took a forklift to get it into the shop. Most people are not going to have a machine like this, but like I said, there are many hobbyist level and consumer level machines for under $5,000 that will do very similar things on wood, just maybe not that exact same size. This particular machine has a 2 horsepower router, or spindle rather in this case. A router is commonly what you would use for a router table, or you know, a handheld router. A lot of them, the lower end consumer machines will use a router simply attached to the gimbal and frame, whereas this particular machine has the spindle, which is very much like a router, just more powerful and set up a little bit differently to be mounted to the gimbal. And essentially what the CNC machine does, if you're familiar with laser engravers, is it literally just, it's really fairly simple. It takes that router or spindle and moves it in 3 different directions. You have your X, your Y, and your Z. So forward, side to side, up and down. And that's literally it. Whether that was a spindle, router, laser, plow in the cutter, it works the same way. So as soon as you get that in your head and you figure that out, it's really not a complex process. Your software tells all the motors here how fast to move, where to move, how deep to go, so on and so forth. And in multiple passes, it will do your cut. So if you recall, in a previous part of this video, 5 or 6 minutes ago, where I showed you the design on the computer, this is effectively being that design cut. And what I've done with this particular design is I've set it to 1/2 inch depth. This is roughly 1.5 inch thick piece, so I figured 1/2 inch would give me plenty of room to backfill with resin, which is what this video is about. Taking the power of a CNC machine, combining it with epoxy resin, which is the fun part to make it look really cool. So once that's done, we're going to have a quick sand and then we'll get to the resin part. All right, the CNC has completed our project. We've got our home and we've got our hummingbird design up there. Obviously with a live edge, it's kind of random, so we ended up with a little bit of the hummingbird cut off, which is fine. But before we put resin in here, we're going to block off the back in case, to make sure no resin actually comes through the board in places that we want to fill. And I'm just going to use tuck tape. You can use duct tape, you can use packing tape, whatever it is, as long as you have a good seal. So I'm just going to do this quickly. And that means if any resin seeps through the wood into these cracks, it's not going to end up sticking to our tabletop, ideally. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create just a little barrier here, so when we pour our resin into the hummingbird figure, it's not going to just run out. Next thing I'm going to do here is just create a little barrier of this hummingbird sort of void interface to make sure that when we fill the resin in the hummingbird, it's not just going to run out into this void. You could do this with, again, more tuck tape, or you could use a combination of tuck tape and silicone caulking. Put a little piece of wood in there. There's a lot of different things you can do. I'm going to keep it simple, and I'm just going to put a bunch of tuck tape there. Get it to make sure it adheres to the edge. And it'll be sufficient. I mean, if a little bit gets through, it's fine, as long as it's not, you know, gushing and being a giant waste of our resin. So create the barrier there. Get ready to pour. Okay, so we're going to select our resin. Now, at Crafted Elements, we work with a couple of different chemical companies or resin companies. Total Boat and Alumilite are typically our go-tos. We love our Total Boat products here because Total Boat loves us. A lot of makers, resin artists use our molds and Total Boat products together, and they seem to go really well. So Total Boat has a complete line of different resins for different applications. Here I've got their thick set resin, which is for doing, I think, 1 to 2 inch pours. We've got their new thick set Fathom, which is actually for doing like 2 inch or 2.5 inch pours. And then we've got Maker Epoxy, which is a Total Boat Just Crow partnership, which is more for covering tabletops and thin layers and doing infills like this. So we're going to put our Total Boat hat on. Yeah, there you go. That's really important to do before you pour Total Boat resin. And we're going to mix up some of our Maker Epoxy by Total Boat and Just Crow. Put our colors together and fill this bad boy up. Okay, here we go. Putting my nice gloves on. So I've got my A and B resin, Maker Epoxy resin, and I'm going to go ahead and just fill this fancy Total Boat 1 quart cup up, because I really don't know how much resin this project is going to use. I guess I could sit and calculate it, but I just don't want to. So we're going, this is a 1-to-1 ratio by volume, I believe. So we have a 750 cup, so we're just going to go to 700. We're going to do 350 mil and 350 mil. Or for our American friends, you got 12 ounce and 12 ounce. All right, so we've got 24 ounces, roughly 700 milliliters of Maker Epoxy resin. I'm going to mix that up nice and slowly. This is a very thick product. It's not a deep pour product. It's very thick. So you mix it slow to avoid any massive amount of bubbles. And of course, when you're mixing resin, you want to go all the way around the sides of the cup and the bottom. Make sure that you've got both components evenly mixed and you haven't left anything on the side or the bottom of the cup. These thicker resins are definitely harder to mix thoroughly, whereas the thinner resins like the deep pour products, which are much thinner, almost water thin, obviously mix much easier. Because I'm doing such a thin pour, I'm not really going to be worried about bubbles. They should come to the surface of the epoxy and I can get rid of them with a torch or a heat gun. So I think we're mixed up pretty good here. Now, at the request of my mother dearest, she wants dark contrast for the HOME, home word, and then she wants a rainbow effect for the hummingbird. I don't judge. She wants a rainbow. Give her the rainbow. So I'm going to go ahead and pre-distribute some resin into these cups that I'm going to use to make the rainbow effect. Multicolors that I can kind of dirty pour into that into the hummingbird. And again, I didn't really measure how much I'm going to need. I'm just hoping it's going to be enough. If not, we could always mix more and come back to it. Now, when it comes to pigments, you know, there's a lot of different pigment companies. Eye Candy Pigments, Black Diamond, you know, Illuminate has a pigment line. Even Total Boat has a pigment line. So Total Boat did send us some of the alcohol-based pigments. These are more solid colors. They're not the pearlescent colors that you'd get with a mica powder pigment. So although I really love this product, and thank you Total Boat for sending it to us, we're going to use a Jacquard pearl pigment. We're going to mix some black, or carbon black, and some antique bronze to get like a dark brown, which will look really good with this the cedar tone. So let's go ahead and mix some of this up. As you can see, I'm not really concerned about, that is not black. Here we go, carbon black. Not really concerned about ratios here. I'm just kind of doing it, I guess you say playing it by ear, but it's not really the right way to say it. I guess just visually saying until it's dark enough and the right tone. And we're just going to gently mix all that pigment in here. So we got a nice deep brown, borderline black, which is going to be really good for our letters. Now don't fret if you spill any resin when you backfill these letters, because you can always sand it off or wipe it off, then sand it off after. If you're careful enough, you should be able to avoid it. And this is really where the cool part comes in about, you know, using the CNC machine and resin to make very cool multicolored signs like this. Take our cup, we're going to squeeze it to give it a little bit of a nozzle there. Nozzle. These Total Boat mixing cups are awesome for that because they're really flexible. And we're just going to start pouring. And I'm probably going to start fast forwarding this video in super fast speed in a minute, just so you don't have to watch me do this for the entire process. I'm going to take my trusty shop towel, get rid of that extra resin that's spilled over. And again, you have to sand this anyway, but, you know, getting rid of a big resin blob in advance is way easier than trying to sand it off after. So there's a couple schools of thought. Now, do you fill these letters all the way? Do you fill them partially? I don't think there's a right answer, but one thing to consider is that if you only, I've pretty much filled them all the way. There's a little bit of a meniscus that's doing most of the leveling coming up to the edges here. but they're pretty much filled all the way. And the question is though, are you going to top coat this? Are you going to use a clear resin after to do like a flood coat of the whole thing? If you are, you don't have to bother being so precise to fill these all the way, because when you do your top coat, it's going to fill in any gap that's left. If you're not doing a top coat, like I'm not actually planning on doing a top coat, I'm just going to use a weather sealant on the wood part. So I did want to have so I did want to actually fill it most of the way if I could, and then I'll sand down the excess. If you have a planer big enough, you can also do that. You could just fill this thing and not really pay much attention and run the entire thing through the planer and make it all nice and straight. My planer is only 13 inches here, and I think this is like 15 or 16 at the bottom, so I can't run this through the planer. So that's why I'm being a little bit more precise with the pouring, and then I will sand after. Okay, thank my lucky stars that I had enough resin to fill, brown resin, to fill the HOME home letters. And now we've got our colors left here. So we're gonna go ahead. She wants a rainbow, right? Rainbow hummingbird. So I've got some different rainbow-like pigments. I've got some magenta. And the cool thing about the thicker Maker Epoxy here is that it doesn't all mix together. It's really it's so thick that it's designed to more or less kind of leave your art and leave your design colors how it is without blending all together. With a super thick, a super thin resin, you know, like a deep pour resin, typically the heat ends up, you know, if you put two different colors side by side in a pour, they usually end up just mixing together, and you've got a really, really big blend of those colors. Whereas a thicker product like this, not so much of a problem. I'm going to go ahead and mix each one independently. Got our Baja Blue. Got a super vibrant pink. This is more of an LSD rainbow. If you're into that sort of thing. And we've got a little bit of magenta or violet or purple, whatever you want to call it. All right, move these out of the way. And we're just going to go to town on this hummingbird, see what happens. You can see we've got bubbles already starting to form. So to fix that, we're just going to use a torch or a heat gun really quickly and get those bubbles out. probably have to do this a couple of different times if you're not familiar with working with resin. You'll probably have to hit these bubbles 2 or 3 times. The resin is fully set on our home signs. Next step would be to sand it down, or in this case, I planed it down. When you're backfilling with resin, you'll end up with, it not necessarily level with the board, or maybe it might overflow. So if you just have a sander, like a power sander, you can start with an 80 grit, then to a 120 grit, and just sand the entire thing until it's nice and level, and you've gotten all the excess resin off the wood. What I did is I have a 13-inch planer, and this piece is just under 13 inches. So I ran this through the planer, and that's so much quicker than, and I will have to do a quick sand with this, but it's so much quicker than sanding because it gives you that nice, you can see there in the camera, even level finish. Now, for the other board, which was wider than the 13 inches, you can also use a CNC for that. So I'm going to move the camera over here, and you can see what I'm using here is a slab leveling bit, or a spoil board bit. And what it does, it's like a wide, 1.5-inch bit, and effectively it acts like a planer. So it's going over the entire top of this this live edge piece and creating one level. So it's basically taking, whatever it thinks is level, whatever you set as a Z0 point, and taking roughly a 1/16 of an inch off the entire top, which will give you the kind of effective, the same thing that you would do is if you were running it through a common desktop or commercial planer. Apologize, that's a little loud in the shop here today, but this came off the CNC machine that we had the slab leveling bit on, which is just a really wide bit, and effectively it acts like a router. So you can see it's leveled this entire slab, gone down past the wood and the epoxy to make everything relatively even. So the last step here is to sand it and then apply a finishing coat. So we're going to do that now. I'm going to start with an 80 grit to get some of the rough stuff off, and then probably move up to like a 220 grit at most, because this is a sign, it's not a piece of fine art. And then we can go ahead and finish it. All right, the sign has been completely sanded, and now we're ready for our final finishing coat, or our top coat. So if this was an interior only sign, or a plaque that was going to be kept inside, you could totally use any epoxy resin. We obviously used the Maker Epoxy resin by Total Boat on this project. We could use a top coat of that, or a flood coat, to completely coat this and make the entire thing just pop and be really, really shiny, kind of like the edge here. However, that particular epoxy, I don't believe is UV safe, as in it's not going to look great over the years outside. This is going to be an outdoor sign in particular, so we're going to use an outdoor water-based wood finish. In this case, this is a Varathane diamond wood finish, water-based outdoor semi-gloss finish. Like I said, the reason we're using this finish is because it is probably going to be used outside. Secondly, although this is a kiln-dried piece of cedar, it's still cedar. It's a generally soft wood. Up here in Canada, we have pretty variable seasons. We can get hot summers and cold winters, and wood that's outside can definitely expand and contract quite a bit. So also, if you top coated this with resin, even if it was a UV safe resin, you're probably going to end up cracking it or developing cracks over the years, simply because of the expansion and contraction of the wood growing, and then the resin separating and then not coming back together. So that is the logic behind using a water-based exterior urethane like this. So I'm going to go ahead and put a liberal coat of this over the entire thing and speed up the video until I'm done. All right, as you can see, I've coated this entire thing with one coat of our urethane coating. I'm probably going to let this dry 3 to 4 hours at least and then do another coat. So we'll get 2 coats on this just so it's fairly resilient and a thicker coat than usual. And what's cool is you can see, just like doing a resin flood coat, the urethane really made this sanded resin pop. So even though we've run it through the planer or sanded it, we've brought back a lot of that initial gloss and shine to the resin. Our sign is now fully dry after we put our top coat of urethane on it. And you can see that the resin has that nice shine again, and the wood also has a little bit of a sheen to it. So now this thing is literally ready to go outside. Now, a couple of other things before we end this video, just showing some other examples of what you can do with the CNC machine and resin. Here's a cool mermaid tail board that we did a while back, where we did a mermaid scale design with the CNC, filled it with multicolored resin, and then top coated it. Currently working here on a couple of different things for the kindergarten program at a local school, some special awards for star students, and some resin-filled signs for our annual Halloween display. So yeah, if you got to the end of this video, I hope you realize how powerful combining resin and a CNC can be, whether you're backfilling with resin or you're doing resin inlays. The CNC will definitely help you with this. And like I said, you do not need a crazy expensive CNC. You know, ours is kind of a mid-range. There are $100,000 CNCs, there are $1,000 CNCs. You know, if you're doing small signs, you can get away with something more consumer grade that's like 110 volt with a router instead of like a spindle. Anyway, I hope you found this video helpful. And if you want to see us make more cool stuff and learn how to make more cool stuff just like this, make sure you subscribe to us here on YouTube, and of course click the bell for notifications. And I think that's it for now. See you later, and happy making.